recording.
All right.
Hey, bud.
I have the intro.
Okay. 1 second. Hit me. I'm not taking a drink yet.
Hey, good morning. It's Richard.
And I'm Noah.
And welcome to Pork Chops, Rice, and Peaches. You'll notice things are a little bit different here because we took the show on the road today due to some technical issues. And we are now coming to you from the lovely burb of Apathy, Kansas, where our town motto is,
We changed sets. This is actually my apartment. That's all you get. Anyway. So you'll notice we also have a guest with us today. This is Majora. This is my dog. He is probably going to be invading half the video, if not 90% of it.
That's okay.
We're just going to pet him. His tail's going to be wagging, and we're just going to go with it.
You've previously known him as Studio Dog, but
Yep. He's really elevated himself and taken the role very seriously. So come here. Sit down. It's okay. Yes, you're very pretty. So,
we have a different topic for you today, one that Noah came up with.
About a week ago. So, yeah, I was rewatching Daredevil. As a lot of people might know, Daredevil has recently re-released on Disney Plus. It used to be a Netflix exclusive. It was a partner between ABC Studios and Netflix as an adaptation of Marvel superheroes. And I'm rewatching it now that it's on Disney Plus and it's a good show. Highly recommend. Definitely go watch it if you haven't yet. And I was thinking about it. It was really weird. I was thinking about it. He's sniffing my monster.
Yeah.
I was thinking about where these stories and how they could connect, because we've never gotten a confirmation yet if they're still considered canon to the MCU. And we never got, it was never fully fleshed out whether they were canon or not. They used to be. And they used to have references to the incident in the Avengers. They called it the incident.
Yes, they did. In fact, in one of the background sequences, I believe in the police station, there was a newspaper headline with a picture of the attack from New York.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So they referenced the Battle of New York, as it's now known. And it would be one thing if they just made these shows and they made them...
I think that maybe when that happened, all the people in Chicago were watching it on TV and saying, yeah, okay, we'll take Second City. Sorry.
That was good. Yeah, where would my train go? Oh, yeah. So, it would be one thing if they just made these and then they just never talked about them again. But in recent MCU news, we now have... Wilson Fisk back. Same actor.
Mm-hmm.
We have confirmation. Actually, we've had more than confirmation. Charlie Cox reprised his role as Daredevil. He made a cameo appearance in one of the movies. You haven't seen that movie yet. It's Spider-Man No Way Home.
No, and
But he makes an appearance as Matt Murdock with the red glasses, the cane, and everything. And there's a scene, it's like a quick cameo. He catches a brick that's thrown through a window at Spider-Man, and Peter's like, what was that? And he just goes, I'm a really good lawyer. Anyway, it's a great scene. And it flows so well. But the question, it was occurring in my mind is like, how, if they're going to go this route and they're going to bring him back and they're going to bring Wilson Fisk back in Hawkeye, how do they make the really dark, gritty content and very mature content of the Defenders saga, we'll call it that because that's what it was, of the Defenders saga mesh with the MCU, which is much more family friendly, has much more of that Disney seal of approval on it. Like, Netflix was able to go kind of all out and really embrace how tough and gritty crime-ridden cities can be, but then you're trying to reincorporate these characters into the much more family-friendly MCU. But that also led to the question of, when is that mature content going to be beneficial for the MCU? When is that mature content beneficial to a story? And that's the question that I'm proposing today. When does mature content benefit the story?
So before we dive into that, let me share an observation with you.
Go ahead.
I was sitting in a movie theater last night. I went and I watched Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Yep.
And very early in the movie, I realized we have the answer to your question.
I hadn't seen the movie when I asked this question. I asked this question like 2 days before the movie came out.
No, not this question.
Oh.
A different question.
Oh, a different question.
So if you go through our episodes list, you'll see that we devoted an episode to the question of, has the way we watched movies changed?
Great episode.
And when you can
watch it,
find it over on that side of the screen somewhere. But very definitely worth watching. But when I saw that Wong had become the Sorcerer Supreme, I said, "Oh, I missed something."
You
and
did.
The only thing that I could have missed was something that came in the Spider-Man movies, and
it was mentioned in the Spider-Man movies.
Right. So you've got this thing going on in the MCU where if you're not watching every movie, you're not missing things that will make it hard to understand the story.
No, you're not missing key developments.
Right, and I just looked and I said, okay, Wong is Sorcerer Supreme, that explains the costume and some of the dialogue, and then we move on, so it was no big deal. But yes, the way we have watched movies has changed. Mm-hmm. Now, to your question, is the way Disney presenting movies going to change? So, if this is coming from the perspective of rewatching the Defenders series, watching Daredevil, watching Luke Cage, Jessica Jones,
Iron Fist.
Unfortunately, Iron Fist.
3
of 4 of those Netflix series were really, really good.
Really good.
And so, I mean, this very easily could be a talk about the Defenders.
Yeah, if we're not careful.
So they were gritty. They were
violent.
They were very
violent.
Very violent.
Very violent.
They took the comic book violence and they brought it to the screen. And the fights, especially with Daredevil, the whole concept of
Punisher. Also good.
Punisher is very good.
Yes, it also falls into that category.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so 4 out of 5.
So, so Disney has to grow a set. They have to. If they're going to do justice to those characters in the series, they're going to have to. They're going to have to say, okay, we're going to make a little more mature content. Now, you asked this question, and I thought you were going to go in a different direction with it, and so this is a whole different conversation than I thought we'd be having. So, define the mature content that you're thinking of.
Cool. I was going to have to do that anyway. So, when I'm thinking about mature content in media, okay, violence in video games, M ratings, what constitutes an M rating, what constitutes an R rating, what constitutes an adult-only rating. And, there's several factors that usually tick all those boxes. Nudity. Easy. Boom. That's an R rating, that's an M rating, whatever.
Sure.
Blood and gore.
Okay.
And then mature themes. Things that are the entire concept of Jessica Jones. That kind of hell, I don't know if this video is ever going to be monetized, but I might just throw it away. But, assault.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Of various varieties. Okay. That's stuff that, I would consider to be the mature content, not necessarily adult content, because we've seen shows in movies that are aimed at kids tackle adult concepts. Like Clone Wars had some very you could call it mature content in some of the storylines they're dealing with war crimes and the fact that it's now the Geneva Suggestion.
Ouch.
But it's still aimed towards a kid audience. So mature concepts versus mature content. And I think the big ones are the nudity, the violence, swearing is obviously would fall into that, and then the more adult serious topics such as assault.
Well, so let's tick some of those off. The short, easy answer to all of this is: does it advance the story? Does it serve a necessary purpose in the story?
That's the most important question.
That's the most important question. 9 times out of 10, nudity does not.
No. I would agree with that.
Nudity is more often than not female nudity.
Yes.
It used to be solely from the waist up. Now you get all different angles.
Yep.
And people seem to be trying to push the limits of how far they can go with that.
Uh-huh.
We talked about the Thomas Crown affair, and while we mentioned that you don't want to watch that with kids in the room because they have about a 60-second very intense sex scene. It's full nudity. It's watching people go at it. It's basically 60 seconds of softcore pornography. And so, could that movie have been just as good without that scene?
Probably.
Oh, yeah.
Probably.
Oh, yeah. You could have suggested the intimacy that they had in a much more tame manner. And the shot of Rene Russo on the beach, naked from the waist up, was purely gratuitous.
Oh, yeah,
You
100%.
did not need to have that.
100%.
And so mature content on nudity, that's kind of a no-brainer right there. Now, you talk about sexual assault, or you talk about the violence that goes with it,
and the very graphic descriptions of it.
Look at the girl with the dragon tattoo.
Yes.
All right. Now that assault is integral to the story. It's integral to the revenge storyline that takes place there. Mm-hmm. But the nastiness and the evilness of the lawyer's behavior, the trauma that the girl was going through, was ugly, it was gritty, it was intense, but it was not titillating in any way, and it was not...
No, you're watching it horrified.
And it's not gratuitous in any way.
No.
And then when she actually pulls out the tattoo gun, you're cheering her on, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is that the response that we should be having, that level of vigilante justice? Probably not.
Mileage is going to vary on it.
Right, in a civilized society. But having said that, sometimes when the victim takes a baseball bat to the head of the abuser, it's kind of just rewards.
I think that's what, on a side note here, real quick, I promise it'll be quick, I think that's the beauty of media and entertainment, is that in scenarios like that, you get to feel... It's safe to feel justified. As long as you remember that it's a story, it's entertainment, it gives you that sense of, you're rooting for that scenario. I think that's just something that media gives you. It's you get to feel justified feeling that way because the story makes it out to feel justified.
I have a real life example of that, and I've told you I think the story of behind that, and so sometimes this does take place in real life, and you kind of just have to laugh at the lengths people will go to try and find some normalcy. So are we well, it begs the question, are we portraying something that does or does not take place in real life? The short story knew of a woman who was in an alcoholic marriage and got tired of her husband coming home drunk, and so he fell in bed drunk one night. She got out of bed. She pulled the sheets over him and tucked him in very tightly, took a bat, beat him black and blue, put the bat back in her closet, untucked the sheets, climbed in bed next to him. He woke up the next morning hungover, bloody, bruised, and had no idea how it happened, and she just went on with her life as happy as can be because, right? Now that is just so unhealthy. And yet there's a part of you that just says, you go, girl. And
you
so
got it.
And so when we see that on TV, when we see like the girl with the dragon tattoo and we see it in the movies, we have that sense of, okay, let's let's go with this. Now, adult content. One of the beautiful parts of Moon Knight, which we're going to talk about here, right? Yeah. One of the beautiful parts about Moonlight is they take a very real and very serious clinical, psychological condition,
disorder,
right? A mental disorder,
mental illness,
and
whatever you want to call it.
They use that as the
basis of the character, almost. It's the character,
right? And so, is it somewhat disturbing? Yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting to see how it plays out. Right? Okay. And I don't want to give any spoilers away on this. But they take this very serious issue and they use it, and so you can have that mature content that wasn't dealt with in any way that was disrespectful to people struggling with mental illness.
Absolutely fantastically well handled.
Is that a child's story? Is that something that youth are going to be watching? Well, they could be, but are they going to understand it?
Probably not.
I have a sneaking suspicion most kids would be bored with that series because the action is far less than the psychology. And so Disney can do that, and they did it without gratuitous sex. They did it without any sex at all. There was really no relationship. They really haven't.
The most they've really done in that area, actually they didn't do it, because the last time you really saw anything like that in the MCU was the first Iron Man. There's that scene where he gets in bed with the reporter.
Oh yeah, and that's pretty tame.
It's pretty tame.
Yeah.
And
don't they roll out of the bed and hit the floor?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's played for comedy.
Yeah, it's played for comedy, and that's even before Disney even acquired Marvel. So the MCU has gotten this far without that.
And so you notice that also the language in Moon Knight, in fact, all of the Disney series, the language is pretty clean.
Yep.
On the big screen, you know my intolerance for gratuitously using the Lord's name in vain, and they dropped it at the end of Doctor Strange, and I remember thinking to myself, this serves no purpose. It just, not only do I have that little flinch response, but there's no point in it. It's not advancing the story in any way, and you can substitute just about any curse word to all right, if you're gonna swear, why that one?
I think you just hit the nail on the head with this discussion, is that what is the purpose behind it, and how does it advance the story?
Right.
So there was a philosophy that I think I've told you about, that I heard from a creator who used to create a TV series or a YouTube series called Ruby. RWBY, if you don't know, it's made by Rooster Teeth. Used to watch that a lot back in its first few seasons. The original creator did a lot of the animation for it, and they did a lot of mocap for it. And when he would go and do fight scenes, people asked him how did he make such good fight scenes, because a lot of those fight scenes are fast, they're quick, the martial arts are good, and they're done in using mocap technology. And they asked him, how did you make such good fight scenes? And he goes, well, the thing is, you never waste a movement. If you're gonna spin, that spin has to build up to something. If you jump in the air, that jump has to be followed up by something. It doesn't matter whether the attack whiffs or not. Like if you completely miss the person and they dodge out of the way, but it has to have a purpose. The more fluff and extra stuff you put in there, the less effective it's going to be in portraying the fight that you're doing. And I think that same type of philosophy can apply to this concept. Does violence or graphic depictions of scenarios help advance the story, and I think I found a couple examples of ways that it does. I think, and I was thinking about this in the car ride, driving back home from Atlanta, and one thing I want to point out, going completely off track, is another not off track. One thing I want to point out as an example that's completely separate from the MCU and everything is Game of Thrones, which is notorious for the nudity, the graphic violence, and everything. But I think
Game of Thrones, the Tudors, and the Borgias.
Oh yeah.
Right. Now those, but those were all cable productions, and
yes,
and they were designed for mature audiences.
Yes, this is true.
You know, you see Pedro Pascal's head being crushed in the fight sequence where the mountain grabs him and just squeezes him. That's
a perfect example of where I was getting at too. That's a great example. I think that it's not all the time in Game of Thrones, and it's probably not all the time in the Borgias and the Tudors, but there are times in Game of Thrones where I think it benefits the story. Could it have been done with less graphic violence? Could it have been done with less graphic scenarios? Yes, it probably could have been, but think of the Red Wedding. Think of how graphic, if you've ever seen Game of Thrones and you've watched the Red Wedding, that is one of the most brutal and graphic scenes in the entire show, and that's saying something. And it carries through to it. That is the driving force behind Arya's plot and her character arc the entire way through. Now, whether your opinions on whether that ended up being a good thing or not, you know, by the end of the series, because everyone has their opinions on the end of Game of Thrones, that was a driving force. And I think how it works is that you could have shown her off on the side watching brutal stuff happen off screen and show her reacting to it and not have to show the graphic nature of it. But I think that graphic nature sticks in your head, and every time you see Arya from that point out, you may not remember the specific scene while you're watching Arya grow and develop on screen, but the effect it had on you, you're constantly reminded of how driven she is and why she's driven. Like, you may not remember that specific scene when you look at Arya on screen, but the weight that it carries follows as you watch the rest of her character arc on screen.
Okay, I'm going to look up a name here real quick.
Go ahead.
Okay. Frank Langella. This guy was just fired. Frank Langella was just fired from a television show, and it was because of his on-set behavior. And the article that I read said it had to do with the film, in part from the filming of sex scenes. And that he was inappropriately touching the actress that he was having sex with on screen. And one of the comments that he made was, it's completely artificial, it's completely inorganic, and they actually have sex scene coaches telling you how to handle people.
Yeah, it's called an intimacy coordinator.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Intimacy coordinator. Okay.
Yep.
Now, who was the actress who had her breakout role? Emma Clark?
Emilia Clarke, okay? Emilia Clarke.
Beautiful young lady.
Yep.
Did a great acting job in Game of Thrones. Really enjoyed the performance all the way through.
Okay.
Have you read any of the articles about the difficulties she's had doing all of the nudity?
Yep.
Okay. A whole different angle to this question.
Oh, yeah.
Why put men and women through this on set?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why put men and women through this on set?
That's an important question to ask when you're talking about this too.
Emilia Clarke experienced a tremendous amount of emotional, I won't say trauma, maybe it was, I'm not certain, but an extreme level of discomfort from what I've read in the press it doing that.
Yep.
And you know, the question is, could you have told Game of Thrones without having all of that nudity? And the very simple answer is yes, you could have.
Yes,
and would it have been good?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it would have.
Yep.
Same question applies to the Tudors.
Mm-hmm.
Same question applies to the Borgias.
Yep.
You
The Witcher.
You could suggest these things without putting these young ladies through that experience. And we are not putting men through the same experience.
Nope. The only time I've seen it is Altered Carbon.
Okay. So
that's the only time I've seen.
You know, and my thought, you see that full frontal on that one actor, and I just went, I was like, damn, is that real? You know, very definitely a show.
CGI gone too far.
Oh yeah, you know, I don't
practical
know.
effects here.
So you know, here's the Stephen Strange sits up in bed from having a nightmare.
Yep. And
the first thing I notice is, oh crap, that guy's got big broad shoulders and pecs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously he's been working out. And there is this new standard in television and movies where men must have chiseled abs, big pecs, broad shoulders. You've got to go through the whole gym thing.
Yeah.
In fact, Robert Pattinson said one of the reasons he didn't want to return to Batman was
because he didn't want to be that shit.
Right.
And,
okay. Let me finish this.
Go
okay.
Ahead.
He doesn't want.
We talked about that.
He doesn't want a 2 to 3 year commitment of exercise. Right.
Out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have all of this pressure being put on male actors now because there's this standard that you must fit and look at this particular. You know, body type. Look at John Krasinski and all the working out he did for his
Jack
roles.
Ryan's and 13 Hours.
Right, because that was not the same dude who was sitting in the office.
No, it is
paper,
not.
Right.
You know, Chris Pratt went through the same thing. He was chubby.
Right.
He was chubby, and now he's like shredded.
Exactly.
Big ass biceps
and so.
Busting out of his shirts.
Men are now experiencing the same thing that women have experienced for decades in Hollywood, is that you must fit this particular body type and body image, or you're not going to succeed. Now, there's one of two ways to look at it. You know, one is, well, you know, finally men are being held to the same standards, or should it be the same thing that women have been asking for years, which is, why do we have to have these standards?
Yeah.
You know, because I am sure that there are men who are uncomfortable with doing these scenes. Yep. Because this idea that, you know, men are studs and players, it's just false. It's not the average guy. Look at the choice that Chris Hemsworth made when he had to film the kiss sequence with the Natalie Portman stand-in. It was the end of a movie where what's her character's name in Thor?
Jane Foster. Is it Dark World?
Jane Foster.
Is it the end when he comes back?
Yeah, Jane Foster runs up and they kiss.
Yeah, from behind her.
Right.
That was his wife.
I know. And that's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. That's why I bring this whole thing up. The article that I read said he walked in the room. They had a whole lineup of actresses, and they said, you know, which one do you want to film this with? And he said, none of them. My wife is the same size as Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
Let's just use my wife, and they did. I mean,
they throw a wig on her and boom. Yeah.
How freaking cool is that?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that is absolutely fantastic. And so, I will make the argument, and I think I've been making the argument, that this stuff is not necessary. And so really the question comes down to, does it advance the story? And when you look at the go-to, because, you know, I really didn't know what we were talking about, so I'm not as well prepared to, you know, use a variety of different examples. But when you look at what you can do with something like the girl with the dragon tattoo,
yes,
and you can see that you can portray all the horror of that situation without doing it gratuitously, there really is no need to be doing this at all. And so, you know, the movies just... Yeah, I think there's the third the third Lethal Weapon movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I haven't.
It had a new love interest for Martin Riggs, and you know, they had their gratuitous sex scene where you got to see her naked, and it was like, yeah, okay, she's pretty and everything, but yank it out. The movie is not changed at all. You're right.
Yeah.
So
so I guess that leaves violence. We've talked about the mature content.
Well, that's not good.
Well, it does that.
Okay.
So it's still recording, but I'll...
Okay. No, that's okay. No,
cut and edit it. Well, I want to be able to see the timestamp.
Okay. Yeah, I wondered about the time. Sometimes we go a little bit
It does
long.
that a lot when I'm recording other stuff.
Okay.
So it's still going, as you can see. So,
So the violence.
The violence. So we've covered the
nudity, the sex, the
swearing, and the graphic concepts. What about the violence? Because I do feel out of all three of these categories, there are things you can do with violence to actually advance a story. Going back to the Red Wedding, that's one example. But the other one is probably the most brutal in the entire Defenders saga, or two of them are probably the most brutal, going back to the Defenders saga of Daredevil, is the two things. You got the hitman who impales himself on a fence. It happens.
Oh,
you haven't seen brutal. It was so brutal.
That was brutal.
And then you've got Wilson Fisk taking a man's head off with a car door.
Oh,
two very brutal scenes, but I feel like those two serve a purpose. Okay. Hey, bud. I feel like both of those serve a purpose. I think they serve the same purpose. I think those two were deliberately shot the way they were to emphasize something. Okay? The first one that comes first is the hitman impaling himself on the fence. And I mean, like, there's a shard of metal this long, and he goes up and he slams his eyeball on it. Graphic, sorry. But that's what happens. And it happens after Daredevil beats him in a fight and starts asking questions about Wilson Fisk. And the dude gets up after having been pummeled by Daredevil, having his arms wrenched, having his fingers almost broken, in massive amounts of pain, gives it up because he wants the pain to stop, gives up the information, and then starts crying and is terrified because he just gave up Wilson Fisk. He just gave this guy information. He wasn't supposed to do that, and he's talking about, he does the whole minion spiel about, you don't know what they'll do to me, you don't know what they'll do to me. But unlike other movies, we see what Fisk will do to him. We get follow-up on this. He kills himself. It could have been very easy to just go, boom, pull a trigger, pull out a gun, pull a trigger, kill yourself because you have no other option. This dude chooses to impale himself.
He used what was available.
He used what was available because he's that scared of what will happen to him and what could happen to his family if he does that. And then, so you're getting build-up. We hadn't seen Wilson Fisk at this point in the series. You didn't know who he was. You didn't know how big he was. You didn't know how brutal he was. So you get this air of, like, how dangerous is this bad guy that someone is willing to do this to themselves to keep their family safe? And then you get the follow-up later where he takes the Russian, he beats him down, and then slams the car door into him and takes off his head.
But that sequence was filmed with the suggestion of the horror because you don't actually see the door hitting the guy's head.
No, you don't.
A lot.
You see the body shaking. You see Wilson getting bloody.
You see the door slamming, but
you didn't need to. Yeah, and you see the body drop. You didn't need to see the actual process of it because the action alone of what they showed was enough to convey entirely what it's doing. They left just enough to the imagination where you're going, oh, crap, this is why you don't mess with this guy.
Right.
Because he will do this to you himself.
Well,
and I think that carries through. Again, even if you don't think back to those scenes immediately, that immediately implants in your mind that Wilson Fisk is not someone that you cross. And that follows through the rest of the Daredevil series anytime he makes an appearance. It's gravity, it's weight to the threat, and it carries through the entire series. Out of all of these, I think violence is often one of the most overused and incorrectly used, but I think there are situations where the violence can definitely add something to a story if done right.
When you are talking about the comic books come to life movies, the Captain America's, the Iron Man, the Thor, the Daredevil, just go down the whole list, whatever the DC movies are.
Yeah.
All the Batman movies. Violence and fighting is an integral part of the story. It just is. It comes right from the comic books. It's action. They put it together. I used to have a slightly different look at this until I started studying martial arts.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned very quickly in martial arts is how simple things can cause a great deal of pain, and how also age changes everything. Because 12 years ago, I took a hit a whole lot differently than I do now.
Yeah.
And so, one, I appreciate a well-choreographed martial arts based fight sequence.
Yeah, love those.
Movie fighting has changed because the old barroom big swinging punches, all of that stuff. Moon Knight's flying knee kick into Harrow is just absolutely amazing, and what I like to see is different moves used. Jack Reacher throws elbows like nobody's business.
And palms.
Jack Reacher throws elbows like we had heard rumors Sensei Dave did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, 4 elbows in a second.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful to see that worked into, now obviously, is it still fake? Yeah, it's still fake.
100%,
But I like seeing the practitioners with their precision and their control, because you and I know what it takes to develop that and to use that so that we're not killing each other every time we get on the mat and we're working. So I enjoy seeing that. The credibility is stretched when people take hits that should have knocked them out, and there's no blood, there's no bruising. I absolutely love Daniel Craig's Casino Royale, because the morning after the fight, the Chinese body, he's got cuts that are healing all over his face. It's like, okay, that's realistic. I like seeing Matt Murdock.
Yeah, completely
bloody, stitched up, all of that
yeah.
stuff, the bruises, because it adds that sense of realism, but it's realism to something that's kind of ridiculous to begin with.
Exactly.
Okay, so, the big question that you see in society all the time is that if we expose our children to this at a young age, are we going to desensitize them to violence? Mm-hmm. And I think, to a certain degree, yes. And I think I think the earlier you expose children to this, the less seriously they take it.
Yes.
You were taught at a very early age, because you've been doing martial arts almost your entire life, that you take this stuff seriously. This isn't a game. Yeah. You learned at a young age how badly you can hurt someone if you pull this stuff out. 90% of America isn't getting that instruction, but kids are watching this.
Yeah.
Desensitizing children to this level of violence is a bad thing. As an adult watching it and knowing the difference, I have a whole different perspective on it. And so there's a serious parenting issue that comes to play here. Do you let your children see this? Okay?
Yeah.
So-
I'm not gonna tell anyone how to parent, but no.
Well,
you really shouldn't.
You know.
You really shouldn't. There's another topic is when is it okay to scare kids? Because I think that is
Right.
That's a different thing. When can you start to do stuff like that? But that's a video we'll have to have another time because that could be a fun one too.
If you go back down the screen here and you look at our Thomas Crown affair, just watch the intro. One of the comments that you make is, we're talking about a movie that I've seen on your shelf for my entire life.
Yep.
Thomas Crown Affair came out when you were 3.
Yeah.
All right, so we've had the DVD.
Jeez.
Oh, by the way, remake far better than the original.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Really?
Oh yeah. Another. you gotta go. Anyway, there were 2 reasons why we never let you watch that movie. You were, in your mid-20s when you finally saw that movie.
Yeah.
Okay. There's 2 reasons. One was that 60-second sex scene. We just there's no need for him to see it. That was the thing.
Yeah.
It's not that it's a horrible thing to see. It's just that there was no need for you to see it. There's far more wholesome things, right?
Yeah.
And so then when you finally see it, you're married, you're mature, you can process it, everything is cool.
Yeah.
It really comes down to, as a parent, what age do you think it's appropriate? And I'd have shown that movie to you when you were 16 or 17 if I was watching it. We just never did.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't show you Pulp Fiction until you were 18, right?
I think I was like 17.
17. I didn't show you Blazing Saddles until you were 14 or 15 because you needed to be able to understand what Mel Brooks was accomplishing in that movie. You show
Fantastic
that
movie. We should talk about that.
Yeah, we should.
We should totally talk about that one. No ad revenue from that one.
I can't. I will find it very hard to talk about a movie where we can't talk about the movie without using code words. That just annoys the heck out of me. But we'll get kicked off of YouTube if we talk about that movie.
Yeah.
We'll work around it. So, the violence. I'm far more tolerant of the violence than I am of
the other
everything else that we've talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So violence can potentially benefit a story. The rest of it can be worked around. Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah. Well, you know what? They can all potentially benefit a story. Gratuitous nudity, no.
When it's Game of Thrones and they're doing it to get the 20-year-old to come back and watch the second season, that's not benefiting anyone except the 20-year-old. I'm ending that comment right there. Quit.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pork Chops, Rice, and Peaches, because I have nothing after that.
All right, yep.
I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. I came into this not knowing exactly where we were going, and this is an interesting topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching.
We would love to hear your thoughts on this. Go ahead and leave some comments down below.
Yeah, let us know what your thoughts on these are. On all these separate facets of the conversation. Let us know. When is violence too much violence? And apply that to everything else.
All right.
When does it benefit a story?
Sounds good.
Thank you for watching.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.